My ex-wife and her boyfriend laughed at me as our divorce was finalized. But then, the judge revealed a final surprise that left them in tears. I am a 32-year-old man, and I want to share one of the most unbelievable experiences of my life, my divorce. Let me just say, it had way more drama than I ever expected. I met my ex-wife about 7 years ago. We dated for around 2 years before finally getting married. At the time, I truly believed we had something special, and I was completely committed. I had been working in real estate sales for a while. Not a luxurious job, but it was enough to cover my expenses and enjoy a few comforts. Meanwhile, she had a part-time job at a local boutique before we got married. But after the wedding, she decided to take a long break to find herself. I wanted to be supportive, thinking she would eventually figure out her goals in life. At first, there weren't any obvious warning signs. We moved into a small house that I had bought with my own money before the wedding. My father co-signed a loan to help me get a better interest rate, but I paid every single monthly installment from my own earnings. My parents liked her in the beginning. She would chat with my mother about fashion and local gossip, and discuss sports with my father during big games. She appeared outgoing and friendly. However, my younger sister was more skeptical. She once told me my ex-wife seemed too focused on what she could gain from the relationship. I dismissed her concerns because I was in love and believed we were a strong couple. Months passed, and things started changing. She began staying out late, claiming she needed space or was with friends I had never heard of. She would come home in the early hours of the morning and act like I was being unreasonable for asking simple questions. I gave her the benefit of the doubt, thinking maybe she was feeling trapped at home without a job. But deep inside, something felt off. Even my sister noticed a shift in her behavior. She said my ex-wife seemed distant, like her mind was elsewhere whenever she visited. One night, she came home at 2 a.m. I had been waiting in the living room, worried sick. When she walked in and saw me awake, she looked surprised. I asked her where she had been, and she immediately became defensive, accusing me of being controlling and paranoid. She stormed into the bedroom, slammed the door, and left me sitting there, completely bewildered. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. No apology, no explanation, just moving on as if I was supposed to forget everything. Eventually, my suspicions got the better of me. One day, I saw her phone on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. I know people say you shouldn't snoop, but considering how things had been, I couldn't resist. And there it was, messages that removed any doubt. She had been talking to another man in a way that went far beyond friendship. Let's just say the texts were explicit enough to break any remaining hope I had. My heart sank. When I confronted her, she exploded, turning the blame on me for invading her privacy. But deep down, I knew our marriage was over. We had a massive argument that night. She accused me of never supporting her dreams, though she had never even told me what her dreams were. She said she felt suffocated, even though I had always let her do whatever she wanted. When I told her she had betrayed me, she didn't even deny it. Instead, she stormed out of the house in anger. I remember sitting at the dining table, staring at the walls, wondering how everything had fallen apart so quickly. The following weeks were miserable. She started staying out more often, sometimes not returning until morning. We barely spoke. My father noticed my mood and invited me over for dinner without her. That night, my parents and sister stood by me, reminding me that I deserved better and that I shouldn't let her walk all over me. They made me realize that our marriage might be beyond saving. It hurt, but I knew they were right. Not long after, I found out she had moved in with the man she had been texting. One afternoon, I came home early, hoping we could have a calm discussion, only to find her packing up some clothes while on the phone, telling someone to make room for her in the closet. I was furious, but at the same time, I felt relieved. At least I finally knew the truth. I told her to take whatever she wanted and just go. She gave me a look that was a mix of pity and annoyance, then walked out of my life. After that, the divorce process began, and it was a nightmare. She quickly hired an aggressive lawyer. In my state, there was a mandatory waiting period and mediation sessions. I refused to accept her outrageous demands. She wanted half of everything, half of my house, half of my savings, even half the value of my car. It was clear she was trying to drain me financially, and her new boyfriend was right there beside her, smirking like they had won the lottery. My parents were furious, but they advised me to stay calm. My sister, on the other hand, told me to fight with everything I had. I felt torn. Part of me wanted revenge, while another part wanted to handle it with cold logic. My lawyer told me to keep my emotions in check and focus on the facts. So, that's what I did. I gathered every receipt, every bank statement, and every document proving I had bought the house before our marriage. I ensured I had proof that she had never contributed a cent to the mortgage or household expenses. Under U.S. law, assets acquired before marriage can remain separate property if not mixed with marital assets. Since I had kept everything separate, my lawyer assured me we had a strong case. Still, every mediation session was exhausting. She played the victim, acting as if she had sacrificed her career for me, conveniently ignoring that she had chosen to quit her job. Her boyfriend, growing bolder, would whisper snide remarks about how I would soon be paying for their dream life. Then came the final court hearing. The night before, I was a wreck. I couldn't sleep, pacing around my living room, fearing I would lose my house, my savings, everything I had worked for. My father offered to drive me to the courthouse the next morning, and I gladly accepted his support. When I arrived, I saw my ex-wife and her boyfriend in the hallway, giggling as if they were about to watch a comedy show. My lawyer met me, gave me a firm handshake, and we walked in together. The judge was no nonsense, which reassured me. My lawyer laid out our evidence. The timeline of my house purchase, the financial records proving she never contributed a dime. Then, something happened that changed everything. I had financially supported everything before and throughout the marriage, and the messages where she confessed to never contributing were undeniable. Her lawyer attempted to paint a sob story, claiming she had sacrificed her aspirations to focus on our home life. However, her narrative didn't quite align with reality. Then, my attorney presented text messages proving she had already been involved with another man before moving out. The judge turned to my ex-wife and asked her directly when she began seeing this guy and whether she had informed me about her desire for a divorce beforehand. She stumbled over her words, and it was obvious she had fabricated the entire timeline. I noticed a subtle shift in the judge's expression. He flipped through his documents, paused for a moment, and then inquired if I had any further evidence. My lawyer reiterated that while some minimal spousal support might be reasonable due to her unemployment, it was absurd for her to demand half of my assets, especially considering the brief duration of our marriage and her lack of financial input. The judge nodded and announced a short recess to finalize his decision. As we stepped out of the courtroom, my ex-wife and her boyfriend huddled to the side, whispering. I overheard him murmur, "Don't worry, babe. We've got this." That remark made my blood boil, but I remained composed. After what felt like an eternity, but was likely just 15 minutes, we were summoned back. My heart pounded as the judge began summarizing the facts. Our marriage had been short-lived. I had purchased a house before our wedding, and she had contributed little financially or domestically. Then, he delivered his ruling. She would not receive the 50% or more that she had demanded. Instead, she was granted a modest settlement to assist her transition and a short-term spousal support arrangement, which would end swiftly, especially since she was already living with her boyfriend. The judge noted that she had another source of financial stability, meaning she wasn't entirely destitute. The look on their faces was priceless. My ex-wife's jaw nearly hit the floor, and her boyfriend's smug expression vanished. She tried to protest, and her lawyer requested the judge reconsider, but he firmly stated, "No, this decision is final." My lawyer gave me a subtle smile, and I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in a long while, I could finally breathe. As the session concluded, we all stood up. My ex-wife stormed over to me, muttering that I wouldn't get away with this. I simply told her the judge had made his decision based on the evidence and that she needed to accept it. Her boyfriend, clearly agitated, looked like he was gearing up for a confrontation. But before he could escalate things, my father stepped in. The boyfriend sneered under his breath, calling me a loser. I simply responded, "You're the one who lost today. Deal with it." His face turned red with anger as he stormed out with her. Outside the courtroom, my father embraced me, and I knew my mother and sister were waiting at home for the news. My lawyer shook my hand and remarked that this was one of those cases where the truth actually prevailed. As we left the courthouse, my father joked about grabbing a drink. You better believe I took him up on that offer. On the ride back, I called my mother and sister. My sister was practically screaming with excitement, reveling in the fact that my ex-wife and her boyfriend had been put in their place. Adrenaline surged through me like I had just won a championship. A few days later, I heard from mutual acquaintances that my ex-wife was furious, convinced the judge had been biased. Her boyfriend was whining about how unfair the system was, the same system they had expected to hand them my hard-earned wealth. Apparently, they had been bragging about their future investments once the divorce was finalized. Talk about counting your chickens before they hatch. Now, they were left with almost nothing. I won't lie. It felt satisfying to see them face the consequences of their entitlement. They had assumed they could manipulate the system and walk away with everything I had worked for. But no, the law sided with the facts. People often assume that an ex-wife automatically walks away with a fortune in divorce cases, but that's not always the reality, especially when she's the one who abandoned the marriage and contributed next to nothing. In the aftermath, I made it a priority to rebuild my life. I reconnected with friends, took up guitar lessons, something I had been postponing for years, and committed to a regular gym routine. My parents started inviting me over more frequently for dinner, which was comforting, and my sister kept encouraging me to take a vacation to clear my head. Maybe one day I will. For now, I'm just grateful to be free from that toxic chapter. Looking back, I wish I had recognized the red flag sooner. But sometimes we have to learn the hard way. I gave my ex-wife everything I could, but she wanted more. She wanted to dictate the entire narrative, seize my assets, and flaunt her new relationship in my face. It was as if she had morphed into an entirely different person from the one I had married. But after watching her unravel in court, struggling to hold back tears as a judge announced her bare minimum settlement, I knew I was finally free. The actual financial payout I had to make was insignificant compared to what she had demanded. The judge ensured that the spousal support was temporary due to the brevity of the marriage and the fact that she was already cohabiting with someone else. In essence, the legal system's way of saying, here's something small to help you move on. I later heard through the grapevine that she and her boyfriend were struggling financially. They had likely envisioned themselves celebrating with my hard-earned money, but that door had been slammed shut in their faces. Needless to say, I don't lose any sleep over it. They made their bed, and now they have to lie in it. So, yeah, that's how my divorce went from an absolute nightmare to one of the most gratifying moments of my life. My ex-wife and her boyfriend had actually laughed at me in front of the judge, fully convinced they were about to cash in on a windfall. But the judge took one look at the facts and handed down a ruling that left them speechless. Moral of the story? Keep thorough records, stand your ground, and don't let entitled people trample over you. Sometimes, life delivers the justice you deserve. And honestly, watching their faces when they realized they were walking away with only the bare minimum, that moment alone made everything I endured worth it. All in all, I'm doing well now. I've got my house, my savings, and a fresh start. Sure, I have a few scars from the experience, but I'd take those scars over being trapped in that disaster of a marriage any day. My father still jokes that I dodged a bullet, and my mother says she's never been prouder of me for standing up for myself. My sister keeps teasing that I should write a book someday. Maybe I will. But for now, I just wanted to share my story, hoping it helps someone else realize that you don't have to cave to people who think they can take advantage of you. If you're in a similar situation, stay strong, gather your proof, and trust the process. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply watching your ex and their new partner realize they're not walking away with the jackpot they thought they had in the bag. So, that's it. Thanks for reading if you made it this far. It's been a roller coaster, but I'm finally off the ride, and life is so much better now.